legal issue. The purchaser isn't going to go to jail. The purchaser isn't going to get sued by the government for buying a coin. Does free speech really exist in here? Because every now and then I drop an F-bomb. It just happens. Is anybody going to be offended? Sir, would you be offended? I apologize if I do. So the real issue is regulators come by 5 days after you've done your sale. You say, we have evidence that you've sold to somebody in the state of New York. Really? Wow. Well, we put up all these roadblocks for that to happen. In order for them to do that, that would have had to have been a deliberate effort by someone to bypass our systems. We had no idea that was happening. Look at all the safeguards we put in place, regulator. Tell me exactly who it is, and we will refund their money right away to make sure that we're in compliance. Well, that sounds pretty easy, doesn't it? Sounds pretty reasonable. Do you tell the regulator to go screw themselves? No, regulator, please tell me who it was. We will give them back their ether or their rare pepes or whatever the hell it is that they use to pay for your token. We'll give it back to them, right? We don't want it. So long as they give us back our coin. So if you know who they are, go tell them to give us back the coin, and we'll give them back the money. In fact, we'll give you back the money, SEC. You tell us the transaction ID, and we'll burn it right out of our code. Right? There's ways that you can stay in compliance. Make sense? So best efforts, best practices. That's the way to go. Yeah, I mean, but so long as you set up reasonable roadblocks, you're going to be all right. You can at least make the argument. Make sense? Yes.
I think the problem in this case, I actually asked the original question. So my thing was that what if it happens thousands of times? Because it's going to be thousands of New Yorkers. So the SEC will tell you, hey, it's not a one case. Like obviously your roadblocks are not working. Or
great, SEC, show me all 1,000 names and I'll give them their money back.
Okay, so
right, you can only do so much.
okay.
Right? You can't stand in front of somebody's computer and slap them on the hand and say, don't do it. Right? You best efforts, reasonable efforts. Sir.
I think the greatest issue or concern we're running across right now is, we want to stay credible. And
who's we?
My company.
Okay.
Wow.
Utility token.
Correct. I think the company bring the digital currency community, which we consider fragmented, together.
Okay. You're taking a decentralized world, intended decentralized world, and trying to centralize it.
No, what we're trying to do is, get rid of a lot of the spams and fraud and scams that are, really keeping the mainstream people from entering the market.
Sure.
So, we're not here to, centralize anything. It's actually, the content, all the material is going to be generated by the cryptocurrency community itself, not us.
So what's your concern with your...
The concern is actually a compliance issue as far as, we've been to Panama, we've been to Gibraltar, and we're really considering going over there, but we're from America, we're in America. I want to see if, like Filecoin did, we could do it in America, out of Delaware, file our 506B and C, and do it the right way without having to be like some of these people you see that are like 5 Israelis out of Gibraltar with the wage token. We're not looking to have that, but...
I'll talk about this in the next segment because we're going to start up the legal panel in 5 minutes. I just wanted to follow up with some of the questions that you had for Joe, just so that you, A, got a little flavor of what's coming, but B, so that the issues that were right there didn't get forgotten.
Filecoin seems like they did all right.
Let me try to say this as politically correct as I can, because every time I've said this at every other convention, people have thought that I'm somehow some government G-man. I'm not. The Ethereum token sale, the original Ethereum token sale, prior to the launch of the platform, absolutely 100% was unlicensed, unregistered sales of securities in the United States. Okay? Just accept it. This is my sandbox. This is what I do. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I'm not saying that they're the devil. I'm not saying they should go to jail. But from a regulatory standpoint, that initial offering, just like the Tezos offering, unlicensed, unregistered sale of securities in the United States, I don't care if you've got a Swedish foundation. I don't care if you go to the Caymans. It doesn't matter. You're selling securities. Just breathe the air, okay? Just accept it. There's very few circumstances where your alleged utility token is actually a utility token, okay? And I work with a lot of companies on this.
So that's why we're filing 506B and C,
Right? So the amount of effort that folks go through to try to avoid regulation, the amount of legal effort, the amount of money they put into it to avoid regulation, if they just take those dollars and go, I'm going to comply, they would actually spend less dollars. And they would bring some legitimacy into the field that these multi-hundred-million-dollar offerings actually have merit.
Correct.
Right? Now, all that said, and I can't speak to those that I represent, some folks thought that they didn't have to comply. It's okay, I'm answering, questions on their behalf in front of the SEC for them. And it doesn't matter whether I help you before or I help you after. I'm not here to judge. I'm here to help. I've helped companies by walking in pre-ICO and sitting down for 2-3 days at a whiteboard with developers and their coders and said, all right, what do you want to do? Do you really want to be a true utility token? And we break down the code and we look at every step of the way so that we're 100% certain that you are exempt because you're not selling a security, right? But if you don't want to do that, if you don't want to let me help you do that, then you're just going to be subject to inquiry later. And then we just handle it on the backside. Does that make sense? So you have to do it before you do it after, and you have to decide what you want to be. Yeah, last question, and then we're going to take a quick break and move forward.
Consider, for the sake of argument, all right, we're just going to consider ourselves for security. Would
Okay.
applying for 506B and C Reg D be sufficient, or are there, in addition to KYC and AML, are there additional regs that should be filed out of Delaware?
Okay, none of those are filed out of Delaware.
No, but I mean, if the corp's out of Delaware, I know 506B and C filed online, obviously.
Well, that's through the SEC.
Correct.
What you're looking at, let's just back it up. Objection, compound question. Let's back it up just a second. You're looking for some very specific advice about your company, about how you're offering and how to move forward. And I don't have enough information to do that. But let me just speak generally, okay? Regardless of what you're going to file, if you are going to try to sell securities in the United States, whether you're selling from the United States, like Main Street tried to do, Charlie Shrem and Jason Granger tried to sell from the United States to foreign investors relying on Reg S. You're still selling securities from the United States, at which point you file with the SEC, recognizing their jurisdiction. We bow down to you. Here is our Reg S filing. We're not going to sell to anybody in the United States. We're selling to foreign investors. And why anybody would give two shits about a garbage company in Minnesota, I don't know. But that's what they were selling, right? And again, nobody bought it, so I guess the market decided on that. The point is, any filing that you make means that you are subjecting yourself to the SEC regulation and you recognize their authority. Ethereum didn't do any of those filings, right? Several of them have not. Now, a year and a half ago, when I was talking about this, people said, oh, well, the SEC hasn't done anything to Ethereum yet. We're just going to copy their model. I said, no, don't do that. You don't want to do that. A couple of months ago, what happened with the SEC?
Oh, the investigative report?
Yes,
Yeah.
saying that all of these things that you're doing are actual securities and we're coming to find you.
Yeah.
My phone has never
And
rang
the
so much.
Subsequent phishing expedition?
Yes,
Yeah.
my phone has never rung so much in the last 2 months. And it's all people calling me saying, gosh, I wish I would have listened to you a year ago. I'm like, I'm not here to judge.
And just filed to add security.
Or just tried to actually, take some simple measures. Anyway, we're past time. It's Adella's time now. This is her panel coming up. I just wanted to answer those questions real quick. All right?
The question was actually, in addition to 506B and C, what additional, SEC filings should be filed for an ICO in general, not mine or yours, but in general, out of the United States.
Each filing has a very specific purpose, and you have to look at what you're trying to do to look under which regulation you're going to file. I hate to be a lawyer right now, but the answer is it depends. And I'm sorry, I'm going to leave it at that. And Adele,
Jason, I thought you would kind of open the floor. I was going to introduce you and kind of...
Oh, you can still introduce me. It's a new segment. Sorry.
My name is Adella Toulon Foerster. I am with the Cogent Law Group in DC. I head the very cool part of the firm, which is the fintech practice, which is where all the cool stuff happened. I always hear like really like horrid stories from like the family people or the immigration people, and I'm like, oh man, I don't think I could do that. But I get to work with technologists and really smart people, and people are way smarter than I ever probably will be, and there is nothing more amazing than having to learn something new every single day of your life. It's fascinating. I have been in the space for, I like to say, 17 years. I know. I'm Satoshi Nakamoto.
I'm
Actually-
Satoshi Nakamoto.
But we know that already, Jason. So I was in the digital gold space. I co-founded a company back then. So I've been around the block, and I've done the tech, and I've seen the whole sort of like the hype cycle, you know, all the way into like the trough of disillusionment. And I've seen people go to jail, including like our investor and a lot of other people, which is why I went to law school. I was like, okay, that's a really good idea, because if we don't understand as technologists what we're doing, we're trying to do something cool, do something different, you know, democratize things that had, you know, originally been unattainable and services to a lot of people. So why are we going to jail? Well, okay, maybe we don't understand the large umbrella of laws that we have to operate under, and as a non-American, I can tell you that this country really, you know, hats off to you guys. You really got the whole regulation thing down. It's insane. But anyways, that said, I am from a little island called Dominica, which just got absolutely destroyed. I just found out that about an hour ago that my mother and my brother and my grandmother were alive. So that was like really...
I'm from Florida. I was recently in a similar situation. It's really just a scary situation.
It's insane. And so my house is always, I call it a crypto house. It's always a refuge, and I always post publicly, like, if you're trying to get away from a storm, I have good coffee, I have Wi-Fi, come hang out. But you know, we're Caribbean people, and we've been through these sorts of things like so much. You can replace things, ultimately you just cannot replace people. So, you know, I'm just happy that so far it's not as bad as as people originally thought that it would be. And so, I will start with some of the dry stuff, and unfortunately, I don't have an adapter, so I'm just going to have to be as interesting as possible. And if you have any questions during this entire process, just interrupt me, whatever you have to do, get it out there. So what we've been seeing is a lot of challenges for crypto businesses engaged in, especially like money transmission, right? So a money transmitter, according to the BSA, is a person that provides money transmission services. So the term money transmission services means the acceptance of currency, funds, or other value that substitutes for currency from one person, oh, and that person means business too, right? Could be a business. And the transmission of currency, oh, we read that already, by any means. Any means includes, but is not limited to, through a financial agency, institution, Federal Reserve Bank, or other facility of one or more Federal Reserve banks, blah, blah, blah. You get the point. So money transmitters are under the purview of FinCEN, which is a department of the Treasury. So if you are a money transmitter, well, I think I'm losing my audience here. If you are a money transmitter, there are certain things that you have to do under the BSA as like minimum. You have to register with FinCEN, and under the BSA you have like two major obligations. It's record keeping and reporting. So under 31 CFR, at the very minimum, an MSB must incorporate policies, procedures, internal controls. They must have a compliance officer. They have to have a designated person. They have to provide ongoing education and training of personnel. And they have to provide for independent review to monitor and maintain an adequate program. So I write a lot of these things with the guy who was up here previously, Joe of BitAML. He's awesome. And what we've seen in the space is a lot of people coming to us and going like, what are we supposed to do? We don't know what we're supposed to do. We want to do it. But it's very unclear because I would call the status quo, as you know, if you may, gray, murky, quagmire, right, Jason? Hard to kind of navigate.
It's, yeah. I would say it's specifically vague.
Yeah.
Intentionally vague or specific?
Specifically vague.
Why do you say specifically vague?
Well, I think the answer to that is that when you have multiple regulations that specifically cross-reference other regulations and don't include that within the regulatory structure itself, then you have to go looking at other regulations in order to figure out what to do. And then
Right.
each administration and each regulatory body interprets their rule a little bit differently.
Correct.
So they're very specific about being vague.
So what's a good example of this? Do you think a good example is, for example, two departments of the Treasury, FinCEN, the IRS, right? The IRS can send you summons. It's called an IRC form 4564. It's an information document request, right? It's not a FinCEN order, but MSBs are under FinCEN's purview. So it's a little confusing, like why are you guys sending us this order? And what these orders say, oh, this is great. What they say is that it's basically about 5 papers that say, send us this, send us that, send us like a copy of all your transactions, send us like all of your customers. Okay, privacy. What is the issue of privacy there, Jason?
Well, a generic phishing expedition by an administrative agency that's looking to understand who you're transacting with, where they're transacting, what their actual money flow is, money supply is, etc., can, not to quote Judge Napolitano, who was speaking earlier, cross over into freedoms of expression. And so, for example, if I wanted to give to your organization as a show of my freedom of expression, and then now that choice, that freedom is imposed upon by an agency because you have to hand it over, you've just inadvertently violated my freedom of speech. So
interestingly,
that's just one example.
what we've seen this quarter, and I
Or a
call this
warrantless search
right.
on another.
So what we've seen this quarter is you're seeing companies operating in the space. They might or might not be MSBs, okay? They're unregistered. Some of them are just matchmakers. They don't really pull a profit. They don't, the main part of their business model is not transmitting, right?
Shapeshift, great example.
Great example.
Shapeshift doesn't actually touch the coin. But do
And
they
so-
fall under MSB authority and FinCEN authority? Anybody have an idea? FinCEN would say yes.
FinCEN would definitely say yes.
Me, I would say no. Only because I looked at the code.
And that's the thing. So there's an issue there as well, right? The big issue being like you have this agency sort of translating the code in whatever way that they want to. They have guidelines, but they always say like, whatever we come up with are based on the particular facts and circumstances, and there's always a discretionary clause. So we're gonna find it to be a money transmitter if we want it to be a money transmitter.
Generally, administrative agencies have this umbrella clause that allows them to interpret their own regulations in the broadest sense to bring the most protection to the people under their delegated authority. Have you all heard that before? No? Do you need me to say it again?
Yeah.
Because I write that down.
This is very true.
The point being that the courts give great deference to administrative agencies to interpret their own statutes. Now, what's interesting, and Justice Scalia, before he passed, was quoted as saying, as to brand new technologies and as to brand new instruments, those regulatory agencies are given zero deference on how to interpret them because they've never had to interpret them before.
Right.
Now, I made that argument to Judge Mazan in Texas in the SEC v. Shavers case, and it didn't matter.
where the SEC, by the way, decided that Bitcoin was not a security.
They did. That was the big win for that, was getting them to admit on the record that Bitcoin as Bitcoin was not natively a security. But the judge, regardless, still ruled that Bitcoin was money, which, depending upon what you're doing and when you're doing it, is awesome, or it's the worst thing ever,
Right.
depending on what agency is coming after you.
This is very true.
In this case, though, Bitcoin's decoupled from the underlying technology that's correct. So, for example, any blockchain technologies or anything would not be subject to this. It's just the Bitcoin.
No, there's a whole heck of a lot more nuance to it, right? I mean, so one thing that made Bitcoin not natively a security is that there is zero management and control by anybody, anywhere.
Right.
Can you say the same thing about Ethereum?
No, no, absolutely not.
Right? Who's
When
got
you-
management and control over Ethereum?
When you can fork
The DAO hard fork,
to roll back funds because there's been a
there's management and
recursive
control
attack.
right there. Monero, what do you think? Monero, do they have management and control?
There's management control.
By who?
Wouldn't you say the team has control?
Fluffy?
Yeah.
The flows.
As goes Fluffy, so goes Monero,
Hi,
right?
Fluffy.
And you know, full disclosure, I've done work for them.
They're pretty
I like
awesome.
them. They're fantastic. I love what they're doing. But there's management and control there, right? So depending upon what's happening, really there's very few cryptocurrencies that have been launched that you can say natively as cryptocurrencies are not securities. Does that answer your question?
I think so, yeah.
All right.
Yeah. So we're seeing, and I'm calling this like enforcement quarter because
Oh.
it's
Yeah.
insane. It's just insane, yeah,
Last question for a while, I promise.
sure. No worries, no, this is good.
What's, yeah, 20 hours a day.
Have you seen the T-shirt in front of you?
Is there any possibility or likeliness that, you know, some kind of, after an SEC filing, that some kind of retroactive litigation situation will be implemented, or is that not likely?
What do you mean by retroactive?
I think he's talking about what happened with Ripple.
Yeah, my chief advisor is the founder of Ripple, so that situation is, you know.
So again, the word retroactive.
Retroactive, say they make a law, pass a law, okay, this is.
The laws have already been in place.
They're already.
All they did was announce to the general public, by the way, you should have been interpreting this anyway, this way, and if you weren't, here's all the law from 30 years ago that we're applying to this, which, by the way, is all the law that I've been quoting for the last 3 years on how these things are securities. So it's not as though the industry has been ignorant to it. So it's not a retroactive application of a brand new law. These laws have been around since, well, you know, the 1940s. 1930s.
Use of the law by the user.
I'm sorry?
So you're just kind of, you know, the person who set up the company or owned the company didn't follow the right guidelines.
Ignorance of the law is not an excuse for not
I'm not
following,
saying
right?
there's
That's the
ignorance.
argument that
I'm not
the
making an
regulator will
argument
make.
Right.
at all, I'm just saying that would be what it would be considered.
So I spoke about this at the end of last section, is that everybody saw what Ethereum did and said, let's do that. And those are the folks that are getting nailed right now. Okay? Because they thought that monkey see, monkey do was the recipe. Again, if I may,
Sure.
I talked about this a little bit in Buenos Aires from a game theory standpoint. And the strategy at that point in time, before regulators had acted, right before the huge ICO drive, and maybe it was my fault, I don't know, I'm not going to take credit for it, was that from a strategic standpoint, an economic standpoint, and even though I can't advise you to break the law or knowingly break the law, it seemed to make sense that financially speaking, it made more sense to beg for forgiveness than ask for permission. If Filecoin can go out and make $200 million
How many minutes?
in 10 minutes,
Yeah.
15
Yeah.
minutes,
And
if
we-
they can do that and not have to register,
They did
not have to
file.
comply, hypothetically, stick with
We
me,
followed the same exact.
if you can do that and only face a minor slap on the wrist,
Why not?
Cost of doing business.
Right.
that's a cost of doing business. If I told you you could make $40 million tomorrow and have a $7 million penalty for a net $33 million,
Do it.
what would you do?
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Hey, the gangsters.
It's a text.
Anybody know Carlos Mencia?
Yeah.
DDD, right? That's just it's a no-brainer. But you have to be willing to accept the consequences. Along with that $7 million, you're also looking at potential criminal consequences, and spend a little bit of time at Camp Texarkana.
Like our friend,
Trent and Shavers,
right?
right? Are you willing to pay those consequences?
Unless
And if
it's
the
your
answer's
money
for
service
33
business.
million, yeah, I'll go spend a couple years at Camp Texarkana, you know, eating microwaved beef and playing poker games with pickled herring.
Well, could it be argued that Trent and Shavers actually ran a Ponzi though? And so-
No, you cannot argue that.
Okay,
I know the facts. I represented
I
it.
remember that, we talked about
Yeah. Excuse me. He ran a Ponzi scheme for exactly 2 minutes. 2
Was it
minutes.
really
Right at the end.
actually 2 minutes?
Yes.
Still close.
2 minutes. Right at the end. After everything was gone, he took 2 lenders' money, and instead of giving it directly back to him, while he combined all of his resources to give everybody back as much as he could, he pulled those 2 investors' monies, put it in with his pool, and then tried to distribute it evenly to everyone. Is that a Ponzi scheme, or is that a guy trying to make things right? I know what I would argue, right?
Right.
But I didn't get to argue that. Anyway, sorry.
No worries, no, this is
Well,
fun.
then is it fair to say Coin did the right thing and followed the protocol?
I'm not going to speak to that. I don't know. I haven't seen exactly what they filed. I don't know what they've been doing on the back end. I don't know what disclosure statements they made. I don't know if the filings that they made are in compliance with full disclosure. I don't know if they've complied with all 50 states' state filing requirements, because you don't have to just worry about the SEC. What state are we in right now? Colorado, right? They have their own securities regulator. Right? Now, Reg D says if you file with the SEC, that usurps state authority, right? That you don't have to file with the several states, except if there's a finding of fraud, your Reg D filing means all your exemptions go away, and now you have failure to file in 50 states. You think I'm joking?
He's not
I work
joking,
for the
guys.
Oregon regulator. We did this all the time. Oh, look, fraud. Sweet. And then we work with the group of states, because it's not just the SEC, then you have the 50 states band together in a group called NASA, the North American State Securities Authority?
What's the state again?
I'm sorry?
Say it again, please.
NASA, N-A-S-S-A. That's the state regulatory consortium. And when I worked for the state of Oregon, we worked with California, Nevada, New York, et cetera, anywhere there was a broad spread fraud. So when you have investors in multiple states, you might want to look at what the filing requirements are in those states. And here's just please, it's okay, you can do it. It only takes 2 minutes and it costs you nothing. If you're going to do a Reg D filing, just do a notice filing with the states. Just send them a letter.
Right.
How much does a stamp cost?
25 cents?
No, like 52.
that.
We're not on Dominica. Soon,
It's
though.
not
We'll try to
25
get
cents
there.
anymore?
Anyway, that's the
Yeah.
point. Don't forget about the states.
Is it that easy, just a letter to 50 states, or is there, like, you have to like do the whole?
I may have oversimplified it, but you don't have to file your PPM, you don't, sorry, private placement memorandum. Remember, when you do a Reg D filing, you're still subject to audit, you're still subject to filing your full disclosure statements. And don't forget about the 14 states that are not disclosure states. You know about that, right?
Damn it.
Wait, what?
Doug.
Oh, you don't know about the 14 states that are not disclosure states? They require fair, just, and equitable filings. Oh, look at the confused faces. Oregon was one. It's called a merit review state. Yeah, I worked both enforcement and registration. So I got to see both sides.
So it's just subjective interpretation.
Abso-friggin-lutely. Oh yeah. This is the best security ever. Red flag, raise the hand. Come on, just, you can't say that. You can't say that. My, real quick, favorite example, a guy was running a medical clinic, diagnostic clinic, and the only experience he had prior to opening that clinic was running an auto body shop.
Jesus.
In a disclosure state, if you disclose that, that's just fine. I disclosed. right? Motorboat blue with the shiny metal flex, buff it out real good. Never burn the paint, the right amount of pressure, it's good. Finding tumors, not so much, but hey, I bought the equipment, so. Disclosure state, you're good. Merit review state, denied. Because you don't have a member on your team that knows what they're doing. So if you want to take Oregon's money, Oregon citizens' money, you better come better than that. Right, so there's 14 states that add this layer of protection above and beyond disclosure. Make sense? Picture if your grandma was getting sold that. What's the layer of protection? Well, they disclosed, Grandma, come on. Why'd you buy that? Well, it was registered with the state.
It happens.
Go ahead.
Which token launches or practices in general do you think are particularly in danger of legal exposure?
Oh, wow.
Oh my
How many
God.
thousands launched in the last
I don't
couple of
know,
months?
the 10 white papers I get on my desk per week.
Per day?
It's
Per day.
insane.
Per day.
It really is insane.
So, I've got the Tezos shirt up here, and are you with Tezos, or were you just in the Slack forum?
No, I run support for them.
Support,
They're still
alright.
a client of mine.
So was it the day before the sale? I was all up in the Slack channel.
Yeah, it was a fun night.
There were a lot of people that didn't actually believe it was me. You can't, you're not really, no, you're not Jason Seibert. Actually, I am. Really, I am. And what was I doing in there?
Asking them what they were, why they were participating and contributing.
Do you actually believe you're contributing? It's a donation to Tezos. Do you really believe you're donating? And every time you'd say invest, the little Slack bot would come on and say you're not investing, you're contributing. Right?
It's like when you want to slash a Howie test, but,
Right. So, the familiarity test. Anybody familiar with that in the SEC? Familiarity? Not Howie. See, it doesn't stop with Howie, y'all. I mean, there's been a lot of law since the 1940s. A lot. And the SEC didn't just say, oh, Howie, we got our one screwdriver, we're done, that's all we need. No, there's been a ton of casework since then. Howie is the starting point. Everybody knows Howie? Giving him money, or the management of others with the expectation of profit, right? So, there have been specific cases that go into, well, what's money? What's the management of others? What does that mean? What's an expectation of a profit? How do you really know? For example, my favorite one was a security that was set up where they said, listen, y'all, you're absolutely going to lose every penny you have. There's no profit here. See, so we're not a security. Listen, when you lose, you can write it off with the IRS as a loss and carry it forward. Right? U.S. Supreme Court said the expectation of a loss to write it off as a tax benefit is your expectation of profit, which, third prong of Howie, the expectation of profit. Oh, you didn't know that though, right? You thought it just all ended with Howie. It doesn't end with Howie. Management of others. There was a case out of Oregon where they scammed the secretary who had shares. And she sued him for fraud. They said, no, she works here. She's an employee here. So it doesn't apply to her because she's an employee. It's not under the management of others. She's part of the team. And the answer was, come on, man. Can she bind the company, wind up the company? Can she make day-to-day management decisions that impact the performance of the company? Shut up. No. Right, so as many of these harebrained schemes we see in these tokens that are launched, of these ICOs, oh, I know how to get around Howie. They've already happened. That's already happened. People say, oh, well, what about this?
So what do you
No.
think? That's a lawyer's answer. I will tell you what you can't do.
Right.
Right.
No, see, that's why I was saying earlier, I've worked with plenty of companies ahead of time telling them how they can't do things, because I don't like to be just
Surely the right
a
answer
negative
is,
guy.
it depends.
Yes.
What's the future? What's
Always.
there a
That's a good fun
solution?
answer too.
It's awesome.
Is there a direction of positivity? Is there a solution to our legal woes in the crypto space? What do you think it might be?
Well, so interestingly,
Go ahead.
and this, you guys might be able to help out here. Here's what happened. So we have this company who's essentially like operating a cool matchmaker-ish platform, right? They're not really profiting, right? And they get this lovely form 4564. It looks really innocent and awesome. It sounds very friendly. They're like, all you need to do, this is just an examination, like the friendly language, you know, is send us these documents, 1 through 28, and a very nice person from the IRS will come to your office to do an on-site examination. Well, that's a bit of a problem because they're not registered as an MSB with FinCEN. Nobody's told them that they're an MSB. So what do you do in that scenario? You have deadlines, you have to produce those documents. Ideally, you need to let this IRS person into your office to go over your Rolodex.
If you have one.
If you have an office.
Right, virtual,
Right.
is here.
So
I mean,
this,
my office is in my basement.
so this really happened, this is real, this happened, okay? So, so what would you do? Somebody, anybody, what would you do? You get this order that says, I'm gonna act as if you're an MSB, you're gonna be subject to all kinds of penalties under the BSA if you don't comply, but you might not be an MSB. What do you do?
Well,
Would hire a lawyer.
what Trenton Shavers did, which was his first mistake, is he told them to go F themselves and come back with a subpoena. Well, it's reasonable, right? And that wasn't the IRS, that was the SEC. I mean, I'd rather go up against the SEC than the IRS,
I would
honestly.
too, I really would.
Honestly.
I really would.
But the correct answer, and the answer that I've been giving on behalf of clients over the last couple of months, is we're absolutely 100% willing to cooperate and comply. Why don't you try to get a little bit more specific with the information you're looking for? We'll review it, see what we can do, and gosh golly gee darn it, if there's an actual violation, we will 100% bring ourselves into compliance and pay whatever penalty is appropriate. And what kind of response is that? Anyone?
A friendly one?
Cooperative.
Collaborative.
It's a collaborative one.
Anybody study game theory?
But Jason,
ahead.
wait a second.
Go ahead.
Jason,
No, I'm gonna
wait a
write.
second.
I'm gonna write cooperate up here.
Right. I mean, you can't tell them to go F themselves. I mean, it would
Well,
be
you
really
can,
nice, right?
right?
It would be so satisfying. But I mean, it's probably not advised to, not advisable to carry on like that. Probably not. So I
Unless you want to pay me double.
cooperation, asking for more time is a good one. And probably applying to FinCEN for an administrative ruling as to the company's operations. I mean, you're already at that point. They're probably gonna say yes. But do you really want to stay under the IRS's like ire?
So
Or
I
move
have
over
a
to FinCEN?
client who was approached by a DHS undercover officer under the guise of doing a real estate transaction. I know, completely unrelated. And then once they got talking about that, he was told that if he did not go into a little room, he would be arrested. And so not knowing what to do, this individual who is in the cryptocurrency space, and by the way, we're all badasses in front of our keyboards, right? We can flame someone left and right, we can do whatever we want to do, but when there's a guy about 30 pounds heavier than me, built like a linebacker, staring you square in the eye saying, you're coming in this room, and if you don't, I'm going to throw you down, put handcuffs on you, put a gun in the back of your head, and you're going to spend a little bit of time thinking about your decision. What do you do? Do you run to your keyboard and flame him? Fuck you, you fascist. No, what do? You tuck tail and you go in the room, right? I want my lawyer. No, you don't. Okay, I don't. And you go in. And what do? 3 hours, they grill you under a light and get all kinds of information without a warrant, without probable cause, without anything, because they're just fishing. It's the great fishing expedition of 2017.
It is. This quarter, I'm telling you. Every single call, it's another summons. Another huge thing that we're seeing is that state regulators are sending out subpoenas to,
Because they can.
based on what? Consumer complaints. So you piss some guy off on an exchange-like service, he's not able, or he just, doesn't like your service.
Flame somebody in your Slack channel? Right?
We got back a subpoena with the customer complaint, and it was full of expletives.
Yeah.
It was absolutely full of expletives.
My life was threatened in the NVO forum, by the way.
Yeah, that's gonna make things kind of easier for, the client.
What do you think I did with
but,
that?
my God.
That's a cyber crime. I reported it to the FBI, as well I should. Right. So we live in the crypto world. We operate in the crypto world. But there's real world consequences. And I don't want to sit here and just scare you to death about everything.
Yeah.
What I think our goal is to give you some tools to be able to think about how you want to move forward, right?
Well, absolutely.
So game theory, Prisoner's Dilemma, anyone? You read it? There's one.
Heard of it.
Heard of it, read it, it's 4 steps.
Yeah.
Right? So there's this competition, how to win at negotiating, that they put on for years. People came up with these elaborate algorithms on how to maximize points. And it turns out it was 4 lines of code that if you ever watch Trump, he is following this protocol 100%.
Oh, he's so good at it too.
First thing, always start off cooperating, always, 100%. And as your code runs, are they cooperating? Yes, they're cooperating. Cooperate. Still cooperating? Yep, cooperate. Step 2, did they compete? Is there a competitive move? What do you do if the answer is yes?
You gotta do the same.
You compete right back. They compete, you say, oh gosh, okay, I guess they win that round. What's going to happen the next time? Are they going to cooperate or are they going to compete again? They're going to keep competing because you're giving them everything, right? So if they compete, you compete back. As some would say, no slap goes unanswered. So Trump was more than happy to work with Marco Rubio, right? More than happy to do that, all day long. And then Marco said that Trump had little hands. And then what happened? What happened? Trump destroyed Rubio. Absolutely destroyed him. Prior to that comment, Trump was more than happy to cooperate with him. So much so that I predicted it was going to be a Trump-Rubio ticket. And that would have been a good ticket. Because I think Rubio is the future of the Republican Party. I don't like the Republican Party. I think they're a bunch of jackasses, but I think Rubio's the future of it. Right? Point is, there's a real-life example. Now, I'm answering the SEC right now on behalf of a client. Started off cooperating. Absolutely, be happy to work with you, etc. SEC came back and said, great, we're going to want every single email to every single customer within 2 weeks. See, that's a competitive move. Now, the little secret I know about the SEC is they just can't get blanket subpoenas and get investigation files all they want all day long anymore. So what was my response to them? Anyone? Oh, I'm sorry, I'll get it to you in 2 weeks. No. You know what? How about you just go get your formal investigation number and you go get your formal subpoena, and why don't we do this under some protections that I know that my client's going to receive, and we can narrow the scope of your investigation, and my client can actually understand his rights in these proceedings today. Copied his boss, copied his boss's boss. What did I get back? Any guesses? We're so sorry. What time do you need? How can we help? We absolutely want to cooperate. Oh, great! So where are we? We're back at cooperating. Because step 3 says, if they capitulate, clear, and step 4, go back to cooperating. Why? Because it's always in your best interest to cooperate. Clear meaning get rid of your grudge. So think about this in everything that you do. Customer service, working with other crypto agencies, working with the IRS, working with the SEC, working with any of these regulatory agencies. This right here is the gold standard.
It's what Ripple did.
Exactly.
And if Ripple had not done that, they would have not been around. They just ponied up and paid that $500,000 settlement.
Eric Voorhees,
Keep on going.
Satoshi dies.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he got off easy.
No, he did not.
I mean, boy, he sure paid his price.
No. Wait, back up. How much was
Doug,
it?
you're right.
50,000.
Doug, you're right. There's no standard. And you're right.
Right.
He got
Did it-
off easy. You're right.
No,
The sale was.
no, back up.
There's no standard.
Look, was he selling a security? Yes or no? Absolutely yes, he even
Yeah.
sold it as a security.
Yeah.
And what was his argument? I was
That's
there
that's pretty
in-
badass, though.
in 2015, right, when he stepped in front of the SEC regulator from Texas at the, you were there, the Texas Bitcoin
Austin.
conference in Austin.
Yeah.
I was.
He's like, oh, hey, you know, I'm Eric. Okay, hi, Eric. Yeah, so I didn't hurt anybody, nobody lost any money. Why did you fine me all this money? Oh, because you didn't follow the law. You mean the law that says I have to file a piece of paper? So I didn't file a piece of paper, so you fine me money? Yeah. And the SEC's response was, so long as that's the law, we're going to enforce it. Right? You may not agree with it. You may not like it. You may think it's repugnant. You may think it's stupid.
But
But
it's
that's
law.
the regulatory framework you're operating in.
And
That's what you've got here. So what
Jason.
did they do? They said, Eric, you have to divulge your ill-gotten gains. Excellent. What about my profits? No, just your ill-gotten gains. Okay. So let's see, I raised 140,000. How about I just write you a check for like 100 grand? Okay, thanks. They get their order, right? They get to say, we followed our law. I divulged my gains, right? I raised 100,000. Never mind, people made like 4 times that. They didn't ask for that back. Okay. And what was the process? Cooperate. What would you like? You want, okay, fine. How much do you want back? Fine. Was there one complaint from any of those investors?
Sure.
Because they all made money. That's what
everybody's
they call the
happy
good
when
deal
they
exception, right?
Anywho, Jason, I do
Yes,
want to
please.
finish off with something here that's super important. Because what we're seeing a lot of as well is just humongous problems with banking. Back when I was the COO, essentially, of a Bitcoin company, Jason was general counsel, shocker.
Fun times.
We had problems with our bank accounts and had to open like multiple bank accounts at a time, always. They
Yeah.
just, we opened them, got shut down.
Jamie
Open
Dimon's a
them,
prick.
shut down. So we are,
Free speech.
what we're doing is that we're taking a different approach. So we're like, okay, all right, we understand that most of this is stemming from perceived versus real risk. From the bank's perspective, bank doesn't want to onboard because of a perceived risk. It's understandable. So we've taken a really proactive step. Joe from BitAML as well. We worked together on this to really start approaching the banks and just being like, all right guys, all right. We do compliance. We can help you understand what you're onboarding. This is an extremely lucrative industry with a lot of people who are doing the right thing with the compliance to match, you know? So let's help you understand this and let's get these clients on board. So far, we have about 2 banks on board, and we had 0 banks on board, so that's a huge step. Another thing that we're actually doing is we are starting out an incubator for companies in the space with exactly those problems. Finding a bank, project management issues, because we get a lot of mom's basement guys. They're extremely intelligent, but they don't understand like what relates to them, and they don't understand the consequences of not following the law. So we're trying to do that, provide legal, compliance, project management, and to help them to grow. Because at the end of the day, it's in all of our best interests to keep innovation alive. And with that, thank you guys so much. And Jason, thank you so much.
You're welcome. All right, quick story about the Tezos shirt. So as you know, I was in the Tezos Slack forum basically saying, are you kidding me? This is absolutely a security. What are you doing? Don't you know this is happening? Of course it's happening. Have you read the documents? It says that they can get bored and abandon the effort anytime they want. And nobody cared, and that was kind of the point.
Badass.
That was the point, is that nobody cared, right? Nobody cared. Now, full disclosure, I bought Tezos.
You told me to.
The point is, know what you're getting into. Know what you're getting into. Listen, if you're thinking about doing a launch, don't do this. Don't go and cut and paste Tezos user agreement.
No.
Come on,
There's
man.
so much of that.
Come on. Now, I want to offer you one thought, right? Do I have arguments that it's a security or arguments that it's not a security? How many of you are launching a coin?
Oh my God.
Outstanding. How many of you have already launched a coin? Okay, how many of you are paying yourselves with your coin? Come on. How many of you are paying people with your coin?
I'm doing,
How many plan to pay people with your coin?
all of it.
So is that everybody except one?
I'm paying people what?
I'm sorry?
We're not launching it.
You're not launching a coin. So the
Yeah,
only
you
person
could-
in the room not launching a coin is not paying with coin. Okay.
Of course. Everybody.
You can't tell me it's a utility token when you're using it as fucking currency to pay yourself and other people. You hear what I'm saying? And I'm using this kind of language so that it gets to you that you're looking at this stuff and going, oh no, it's a utility token.
No.
Bullshit. Not if you're using it as a method of payment.
Super true.
Do you understand?
Yeah.
When you read the Tezos agreement, the Tezos founders who are licensing this get paid performance out of their own coin. What?
It's not a security though.
What?
No, not a security.
Right. Oh no, we want to pay developers out of our coin. Why would you do that? It's a utility token. Look, I want you to think about this for a second. A utility token is a Groupon, okay? A utility token is a Groupon. It does something else other than be what it is, right? I'm going to give you a token, and you can get a cup of coffee with it. Is your developer going to get paid with cups of coffee? Some do, right? Some do, right? And that's okay, but the second you make it that, per Judge Mazant in SEC v. Shavers, you have just made that money. And now it fits the definition of money under the Howey test. Not just Judge Mazant, but also Judge Rakoff in the 7th District of New York. If it's a utility token, keep it a utility. Do you hear what I'm saying? If it's a utility token, sell that software as software. If you were dependent upon the price of your Microsoft Word subscription to be that of a secondary market, does Microsoft change the price of Microsoft Word on a daily basis, whether or not it's pamping on Polo? Anyone? No. But you do that with your utility token, and you want to make the argument that it's not a security? Come on. Come on, listen. I want you to picture this. Just picture this visual. There's a gun. It's a Smith & Wesson. It's a revolver, right? Wheel gun. There's 6 bullets. There's 2 guns. One's in front of you, and one's in front of the SEC. And there's 6 bullets. And every time you make a decision to get away from an actual utility token, you are handing a bullet to the SEC. Want to pay yourself with your own coin? Just hand them the bullet. You want to call it an ICO? Just hand them a bullet. You want to put it on an exchange? Just hand them a bullet. And as many bullets as you give them, you take away from me to be able to argue for you. Do you understand? Right? Because the whole ICO mentality comes out of the IPO world, right? It's all Silicon Valley. We're all going to get rich in 2 weeks. We're going to retire to an island, smoke a bunch of weed, drink a bunch of rum, and we're going to put chillin' the most on the back of our boat, right? Listen, if you really want to be a utility token and bypass SEC regulation, I'm sorry, you actually have to run a company that sells a product. You have to do that work. Otherwise, just accept that you're handing bullets to the SEC to come after you. And if you're willing to play Russian roulette, that's great. And however many bullets you give to them, how many bullets you keep for yourself. If you say, oh wait, well I still have this one bullet. Great, you've got one bullet. And they got 5. I'm a pretty good shot. Pretty good shot. But Shavers only left me 1 bullet. Because he represented himself up until the time that I got there. And it didn't matter. The SEC had 5. Make sense? So if you're going to jump into something, if you're going to do something, if you've already done something, it's okay. I'm not here to judge you. That's a different attorney. I'm just a lawyer, not a judge, right? We can offer help. Adella can offer help. Joe can offer help. We can help you the best we can.
Are you
Yes,
a lawyer,
question.
Jason?
I'm not your lawyer. Not yet.
Can you give a good example of a pure utility token?
Yeah, sure. Let me give you an example of one that launched, and he's not really a popular guy. All right? Reggie Middleton. Veritasium. Hands? Yes? Prior to Reggie launching his token, what was Reggie doing? Other than sitting on panels with a really deep voice that I can't, nobody...
Making cool videos on YouTube.
Making cool videos on YouTube, right?
Market analysis.
Market analysis, he was already doing market analysis, selling himself as market analysis, but more importantly, he was forming and basically acting as the proxy for complex swap instruments and financial instruments, trading value. He was already a facilitator for that. He was already doing that, providing that. And if you look at the core of what Veritasium does, is it provides that service that he was doing in a smart contract that he programmed Veritasium to do. So when you bought Veritasium, you were buying that vehicle to do that swap. Okay? Make sense? He sold an existing service that he already had, just in electronic form. Make sense? The more you're selling something you can already do, that you already do, the more you're a utility token. What's your utility token do? It does something I've done for 20 years. Right? I made a really great brand of salsa in my garage. Awesome. Here's my salsa on the blockchain. It's salsa coin. You can redeem this coin at any Chili's for salsa. That's a utility token. Right? Switch the thought. Otherwise, just admit what you are. You're another coin that's trying to get on a market, that's trying to increase in value, so you can retire early. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's the market that we've seen for the last 3 months. I mean, come on. Ethereum went from what, 3 to 120 in 2 days? Ish. That might be a touch of hyperbole, but who doesn't want that? And if that's your blueprint, great, own it, but be prepared. Of that money that you make, set aside a couple $100,000 for legal services to beg forgiveness. Because when the SEC comes in, and this is what they did to Shavers, they filed the complaint without him even knowing it. And they got an order to freeze all of his assets before he even got served. Think about that for a second. The SEC got an order to freeze all of his assets before he even knew he was served. So when he got a copy of the complaint, and he walked into a law office to try to get representation, they're like, well, I'm not going to get paid, so there's the door. What does that mean? What options do you have? You can start your own legal defense fund. You can set aside those assets. If you're riding that edge, at least make your own self-funded insurance policy, right?
Do you have any advice then for future SATs, software application token companies? I mean, that's what we're all here for, I think. What's the right way, apart from hire a firm? Of course, we should all do that, but, you know, is there any advice you have for the peeps?
Can you be a little bit more specific? That was a very generic
I
question.
know, well, I mean,
What advice do I have? Have
Incorporating out of another country.
yeah.
doesn't help.
Yeah.
I mean, sure, you can go to the Caymans, that's old school. It doesn't really do you any good. Your money's now in a different country that could be destroyed by a hurricane, and then maybe they don't have records of your money, and then it's gone. I mean, that's cool. Go for that.
There's one thing that surprised me, when you gave the bullet to the ICO, if they call it an ICO, give it a bullet to the SEC.
Yeah,
My thought is.
that's called the family resemblance test that came out of SEC with Glenn
I
Turner.
mean, like, so what, I call it a token launch, I call it a token offering, I call it whatever else,
Right.
like, they're smart enough to know it's an ICO.
Yes, that's the resemblance test.
Right, so, it doesn't matter what you call it.
Yes, it does.
You think you call it ICO is different than calling it ICO?
No. But if you say, I'm selling software, and you're selling software, great. If you say, I'm doing an ICO, but you intend to sell software, if you have to explain something, you've already lost.
But
What have you lost?
if
You've
I
lost
say
time,
I'm
effort, energy, money, because now I have to explain to the SEC, no, look, it's not an ICO, it's not a security, it's actually a utility token. Well, then why did they call it an ICO?
But saying is, if I'm selling a security token, I call it an ICO, no problem.
Sure. Yeah, of course. Correct. Think about that. If you have to explain it to a regulator, you've already lost from the concept of time, effort, energy, money.
And so now what's the proper process for an ICO, anything that's not a utility token is an ICO?
So, look, that, I hate to do it, it depends on how much you want to raise, who you're going to raise it from, right? Where you're going to raise it.
How you're gonna do it?
How you're going to do it, right? So if you want to raise $7 million, and you're not going to do a general solicitation, and you're just going to go a traditional investment route, great, that's a Reg D filing all day long, and you focus on accredited investors, you go old school with it. Right? That's why it all depends. If you're going to do less than 25 million, are you up? Okay, sorry. Oh, sorry. Yeah. There's different vehicles for it, right? Whether you're Jobs Act, Reg A+, whether you're doing a Reg S overseas, Reg D, full filing, it's what puzzle fits you.
His clients,
We'd like to talk to you.